Hey folks, Barry Blasters in the Desert here. I wanted to take a minute today to do a quick little video about something that's come up a few times recently. It's specific to some proposals for, these are political proposals, including what they say they call holding the firearms industry, accountable or responsible for what happens with their, their goods after they're purchased and distributed and sold, whatever. And specifically, there's talk about what's called the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. So the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, PLCAA, is a 2005 law that came into being to prevent frivolous lawsuits against manufacturers of arms, companies that make guns, who make ammunition, who make things like that. And again, one of the proposals being floated, an idea being floated, is to just repeal that and to hold manufacturers responsible for everything that happens with their goods, all the way down the chain. And so I think there's some misunderstandings about what exactly that means, and I just wanted to take a few minutes to kind of talk through it, discuss what it is and what it isn't. And for me, a great way to demonstrate what's going on is I made a nice little visual. So I hope you can read it all. I'm going to walk through it here. So basically, here's the scenario. From the top, the manufacturer of a firearm. So something like this, company that makes this. We're going to call them Acme Arms. They're the manufacturer. Let's say that that's me. I'm Acme Arms and I make rifles. So I make a rifle for sale to the civilian market. Cool. For the most part, guns aren't sold directly from manufacturers to the market. There are some smaller shops that do that, that sell directly, factory built guns directly to consumers. But more and more, as more shops are set up and more retail opportunities are available, typically they'll go through a distributor. And so the distributor will buy up 1,000 guns at a time, for example, and the distributor will then send those out based on existing orders to the retail shop. So the retail shop is anywhere store that you walk into to buy a gun. So it might be a local shop, it might be a big box store, whatever it happens to be, but anywhere that you're going to walk up to a gun counter and say, yes, that's the gun that I want. That's the Acme Arms rifle that I want to buy today. So I'm going to walk through a hypothetical here. And so, again, I'm Acme Arms. I've made a rifle. I sent it to my distributor who ordered in bulk, who has then sent it on to the retail shops. One day at the retail shop, in walks Dave. Dave says, I want that Acme Arms rifle right there. Sell it to me. Shop says, okay, here's your background check that you need to fill out. Dave fills out the 4473 as required by law background check. And the background check comes back as proceed. The sale is completed. Dave walks out with the gun. Now, Dave's purpose for buying this gun is because his brother Steve is getting married, and Dave wants to get a gun for his brother for his birthday, as a wedding gift. Now, before anybody starts talking about how that's a straw purchase, it's not. As long as Dave is not a prohibited person and Steve is not a prohibited person, it's legal to buy a gun for somebody else. Okay? That being said, we'll move on. So now Steve is in possession of the gun. So now you can see the gun has gone from me 1, 2, 3, 4 steps removed from me already. Okay? 10 years from now, 10 years, 10, 15, 20, however many years, Steve's like, man, rent needs to get paid, a couple $100 short, and I don't really shoot this gun that much, so I'm gonna sell it. So Steve takes his gun down to pawn shop, Anytown pawn shop, down the street from him. Pawn shop gives him pennies on the dollar for it, because that's what pawn shops do. They gotta make money too, I get it. and it sits in their inventory. Okay, they record it as received. Uh, they have a firearms bound book where they record that they've received it, and it's now theirs. A couple of months later, Susie comes along, and Susie says, "Hey, that's the Acme Arms manufacturing gun that I've been looking for. I want to buy that." Anytown Pawn says, "Cool." Again, they fill out a 4473 background check as required by law. Susie passes the background check. She walks out with the gun. 6 months later, a year later, another 10 years later, doesn't matter, along comes Tom. Tom's a thief. Tom breaks into Susie's house and steals her gun. So now Tom is illegally in possession of an Acme Arms manufacturing rifle. Because Tom's a thief and a criminal, he doesn't want to keep the gun. He just goes and steals guns to get for other people. So he sells it to George. George is the buyer there. George doesn't do a background check because he's a criminal. He's probably not concerned with where the gun came from or what it's done, who owned it before. Doesn't matter to him. He's just going to use it for crimes. Which he does. He uses it on Jane. She's the victim. George robs her. George shoots her. George kills her. Whatever happens to be. So, if the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act were to be repealed, Jane's estate, a surviving husband, her kids, whatever happens to be, Jane's surviving estate would sue me for manufacturing that gun, for being responsible for that gun. Even though, as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 levels removed from that activity, the manufacturer would be held responsible. And what's important to remember about this is, while other industries do have protections against, certain such lawsuits like this, nothing would be comparable to something like this. Okay, if you go into your local fast food joint, eat a hamburger, and you get sick, you don't end up suing the president of the company that made the hamburger bun. Okay, that's not how it works. If it comes back, you got poisoned by listeria or whatever by the ingredients, yeah, those companies might be held responsible, because in those cases they are responsible. But you don't get to hold somebody so far removed from the actual activity responsible. So, again, the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act, I know people like to think that repealing it would provide more responsibility and make the industry more accountable for what they make and they sell. But the fact is that things happen so far down these streams that none of these entities are to be held responsible. The responsible party for what happened to Jane is George. And you could go back to Tom and say that Tom facilitated it by stealing the gun. This is where the crime starts. All of this, every step along the way here, is 100% legal. When Tom comes into play, that's when it becomes a crime. This is where the responsibility starts and stops. So, I know that this has been kind of a confusing topic for some folks, and so I hope that this very, rudimentary explanation of some of it helps to kind of visualize exactly what the chain of events might look like, and why the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act exists, and why it's necessary. So, take that for what it's worth, and I hope that you learned something. That's it. Thanks for watching.